In the heart of a sprawling, opulent mansion, sunlight streamed through crystal chandeliers, casting shimmering patterns across the marble floor. A wealthy father sat with an air of confidence in the grand living room, a table before him lined with glossy photographs of breathtakingly beautiful women. Each one was a model, poised, glamorous, and seemingly perfect. His only son stood nearby, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. The father leaned forward with a proud smile. "Son," he began, his voice deep and commanding, "it's time for you to choose your future mother. I have gathered the most beautiful women money can find. Any of them could give you the life you deserve." The young man's gaze drifted over the photographs, pausing on each face. The women were flawless, the kind of beauty that turned heads instantly. Yet, as he looked, an odd emptiness settled in his heart. There was no spark, no connection. Each face seemed distant, as though painted on a canvas rather than belonging to a living, breathing soul. The father waited, expecting excitement, perhaps even awe. But instead, his son felt a quiet discomfort. He thought about what it truly meant to share a life with someone. He remembered small acts of care, moments of genuine warmth, the kind of kindness that money could never buy. As the father proudly gestured toward the photos, certain his son would be thrilled, the young man's mind was already wandering far beyond the glittering images laid out before him. Something, or someone, was missing. The grand mansion was alive with movement and elegance as the models began to arrive, each one draped in designer dresses that shimmered under the soft glow of the chandelier. Their laughter floated through the air like music, mingling with the faint scent of expensive perfume. They greeted the wealthy father with polished smiles, exchanging polite compliments as they took their seats in the lavishly decorated room. In the midst of all the glamour, a quiet figure moved almost unnoticed. The maid, dressed in her simple uniform, carried a silver tray of tea and snacks. Her steps were careful, her posture humble, and her eyes focused on making sure every guest felt cared for. She placed cups gently before the models, her hands steady despite the buzz of conversation around her. The young son, seated near the corner, watched her quietly. She didn't try to stand out, nor did she seem concerned with impressing anyone. There was a softness in the way she asked if someone wanted more tea, a sincerity in her smile when she was thanked. Unlike the calculated grace of the models, her kindness seemed effortless, the kind that came from habit, not performance. As she stepped back into the shadows after serving everyone, her presence lingered in the young man's mind. She was the only one who had glanced at him not as the heir to a fortune, but simply as a person. In that moment, he began to see the stark contrast between beauty that dazzled the eyes and kindness that touched the heart. The room grew quiet as the father leaned back in his chair, clearly ready for the moment he had been anticipating all day. With pride in his voice, he asked, "So, son, who will it be?" All eyes turned toward the young man, expecting him to choose one of the radiant women seated before him. The model sat with perfect posture, their smiles poised, each confident that her beauty would secure the decision. But the son didn't look at the photographs or at the glamorous women. Instead, his gaze shifted toward the corner of the room, where the maid stood with her hands clasped, unsure if she should even be present for this conversation. Without hesitation, he pointed at her and said, "I choose her." A stunned silence swept through the room. The maid's eyes widened in disbelief, her lips parting but no words coming out. The models exchanged quick, confused glances, their confident smiles faltering. The father's proud expression froze, the warmth in his face replaced by shock. "The maid?" he asked slowly, as though he couldn't believe his own ears. "Why?" The son met his father's eyes, his voice calm yet firm. The choice wasn't made in impulse, it came from something deeper, something the father had not anticipated. In that charged moment, it became clear that this was not a decision based on appearances or status, but on something far more meaningful, and it was about to change the conversation entirely. The son rose from his seat, his voice steady but carrying an emotion that made the room fall completely silent. He looked directly at his father, his words slow and deliberate. Because beauty fades, father, but kindness stays. He glanced toward the maid, who still stood frozen, her hands trembling slightly. Every day, he continued, she treats everyone in this house with respect, from the gardeners to the guests, even when no one notices her. She doesn't speak to me because I'm your son, she speaks to me because she actually cares. She's the one who asks if I've eaten, who notices when I'm upset, who quietly makes sure I'm okay without ever expecting anything in return. The father's eyes narrowed, but not in anger, in thought. The son's voice softened as he said, I don't want a wife who only shines in front of a camera. I want someone who knows how to love, even when no one's watching. The models sat in uneasy silence, their perfect smiles gone. The maid's eyes filled with tears, overwhelmed by words she never imagined would be spoken about her. The son's honesty cut through the polished veneer of the room, leaving everyone quietly reflecting. In that moment, the wealthy father realized his son wasn't rejecting the women for their beauty. He was choosing a life built on something far more enduring. The air in the room shifted, heavy with an unspoken truth, real worth can't be bought. The father remained still for a long moment, his sharp, businesslike demeanor softening as his son's words sank in. He had spent a lifetime believing wealth could secure the best of everything, the grandest home, the finest cars, the most beautiful companions. But now, in the quiet that followed, he saw his son standing before him with a conviction that no fortune could buy. Slowly, he turned his gaze toward the maid. She looked down, unsure if she should meet his eyes, her hands nervously clutching the edge of her apron. Then, to everyone's surprise, the father rose from his seat and walked toward her. His steps were unhurried, his expression thoughtful. When he finally stopped in front of her, he gave a small, respectful bow, something no one in the mansion had ever seen him do. "Welcome to the family," he said softly. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of acceptance, not just of her, but of the values his son had chosen to live by. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling onto her cheeks as she tried to find her voice. The son stepped beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. For the first time, the mansion's lavish beauty seemed to fade into the background, replaced by something warmer, a shared understanding that love, respect, and kindness were worth more than gold. In that moment, the wealthy man's home was no longer just a house of luxury. It became a place where hearts, too, could be rich.